Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Nature Folklore Sessions, 19th of December, 2021. Well, thank you for joining me for our weekly time of exploring nature-centered folklore, connecting this to your favorite sanctuary space, and expressing your inspired visions through your sanctuary, through your poetry, writing, arts, craft, performance, and problem solving. Now, this afternoon's theme is part 3 of our 4-part Yule season, and it's going to be Yule Goat and Yule Log tales. And I'm going to be featuring the Saga of the Yule Goat, which started off as a suggestion from Kate Cloud Sparks. I thought, I'll give it a couple of minutes. When I got into it, oh, goodness me, the amount of folklore, and I just got engrossed in it. So if you're from Scandinavia, I haven't lived in Scandinavia. I've only lived in places that's been influenced by Scandinavian law. So please correct me as you go along. And this is very much regional, what I'm going to be talking about. So if you're from Scandinavia or your parents are, please put in the little traditions and the variations that they did. Put that in the comments. I'll add to the variety as well. And I'm going to be adding the Yule Log, and Night of Hope is our title of that. And then if I've got time, which is now doubtful because how much of the Yule Goat I'm going to be adding in, I'm going to include Blessing Our Homes with Green, Dagda or Deuter and the Three Hags, and general lore of blessings from dark to light. Now, I'm dressed a bit differently because my intention was I was going to be dressed in holly and ivy and all the rest of it. But I use a green screen and I didn't have time to actually change it over to be a blue screen. So I had to take the whole down thing off. I'll give you an here's one of the things I was going to wear. Look how this vanishes. There we go. You can see where the problem is. I couldn't exactly wear that with a green screen, could I? So excuse me for not looking the part. I don't have the overalls on. I'm in the studio and I warmed it up late, so it's pretty cold in here. And I'm only using one light on the green screen as well. We'll see how we get on with that. I'll put the 2 if it gets a bit dark or I start fading away into the green screen. Anyway, glad that you're with us. We've got a couple of guests who are going to be featured. They're actually on video. They're not going to be with us. We got a lovely Sinead McClure. There's a regular, and Chandler Nichols got a beautiful poem in perfect scenery for this time of the year. I think you'll adore that. And also, I'd like to say, and I'm going to be talking a lot about this on the first Nature Folklore in January. If you're a poet or a storyteller and you'd like to be featured on Nature Folklore as a live guest or a pre-recorded video, please message me and I will contact you with the theme subjects that are coming up. And you may find you've got something or create something that contributes very well to the themes that are coming up. So, as I say, each week, these Nature Folklore session videos and tree sanctuary support are brought to you due to support of our appreciated subscribers through Patreon and PayPal donators. And there's the Patreon address there. So thank you for your help with this. And the subscribers are with us live today and join us later, because if I didn't have subscribers, I wouldn't be able to fund being here, sharing this show with you. So let's see which lovely early birds are with us on what would be a very busy day coming up for the solstice, isn't it? And the Christmas as well. And we got Alan here, who must be very busy with his balloons. I'm surprised he's got time. There'll be some serious balloon blowing going on now. And Castlemaine USA, our lovely regular Sherry Murphy, is around. A lot of beautiful snow this morning. There was a snow forecast for Christmas Day here, but it seems to have shifted. We'll have a sunny day. It's been shifted to the next day, which is St. Stephen's Day. Here's the current forecast. And Ken wood sculptor Nash in his carving shop there, brilliant. Tuning in for a bit. and he's in northern Michigan. So lovely to have you here. And Sherry says, if you aren't dressed like the Holly King, you're looking awesome. Well, there's a compliment. There we go. I'm going to be talking about ghosty images today. Look at that. I just totally disappear under the holly and ivy. So you can't see that. Blue screen one day, I suppose. Let's see how that goes on. So thank you very much for being here. And I'm going to start off. Where's Kate? Anyway, she'll be watching this from the beginning. This is a request of Kate Cloudspark. So this is the saga of the Yule Goat. And as I say, it started off as a wee little thing, and it turned out to be quite a big thing. And so anyway, to sort of backtrack, I got my photos up. So here's a good picture to start you off with. There you go. That's very seasonal with a goat, isn't it? And I say we're going to be talking. I'll talk a bit about the Yule Log a bit later. We got Sinead McClure coming up, and Chandler Nichols there, who's very much more or less dressed for the last week, isn't she? With the deer, deer folklore. Here we go. I'm getting right after the point of midwinter solstice, the point of Yule. We're now moving very shortly into the month of Capricorn. That's what happens at solstice, and the Capricorn has its symbol of the goat with a kind of mermaid or fishtail. And that Capricorn sign is actually known as the sea goat. Now, when I lived on the Isle of Mull, I discovered that wild goats actually gave birth to their kids on the seashore, or not close to the seashore, during the end of December and early January time. So they took advantage of the whole Capricorn time to have their kids. And their mothers would leave their baby goats amongst the seashore while they went off foraging for food for them. And the goats, they actually ate the seaweed on the shore as well. And I gather farmed goats, they also give birth not far from this wild goat birthing time. I get a door-to-door delivery of goat's milk. I should have had a picture of that. It's wonderful. It's goat's milk in bottles that we get delivered door-to-door. And he's having difficulty in supplying everybody at the moment because the goats are about to give birth, and they need the milk for their wee goats. Now, it was a regular subscriber to our nature folklore, Kate Cloudsparks. Let's see if she is actually. Yes, she is. There she goes. And there she's announced goats. Right, here we go. And so, green screen, modern day green man. Good morning from Tennessee. Chandler's on board. But the most important thing, Kate's here. And as you know, that's actually Kate and goats in my green screen at the moment. So we've kicked off right there. And she asked me, as I say, to go ask me, was there any goat law for this holiday time? So here we are. So I'm very pleased that Kate asked for this. And here's another one close up of Kate in the sort of weather of the time. And I feel this it's going to sort of wrap up a lot. What I'm going to talk about goats is going to be an incredible wrap up of the Yule series in a way, although there's one more episode yet. And what I'm about to share with you is probably going to tie up most, if not all, of the colorful but perhaps corrupted and fragmented traditions of Christmas that we share at this time. Now, the beauty of this evolved Yule Goat story, I find, is that it serves further understanding and even trust and even comfort in knowing that this is a time of a natural, I call it a snakeskin shedding style of celebration. We're getting rid of the old skin from the last cycle, aren't we? And we're getting excited about getting the new light and getting into, exercising with our new skin. And so I feel that's what's the lovely part of this time. And it's all celebrated as part of our continuing living cycle, the annual cycle. So this does take us way beyond Jesus into the beautiful, essential natural mechanics of living nature. So I have to put this up, don't I? Because I feel that religion and corporate living, it seems to have set out to demonize and demoralize in our minds a lot of what was celebrated, the unity of what was celebrated. It was, forget your home traditions, we've got this, boom, boom, glitter, glitter, glitter. And you know how that goes or how that is going. And we wonder why we do it all the time. But fortunately, I think we are waking more into what nature is. And more important, how we are part of nature and not the ruler of it. Now, Germanic and the Scandinavian people, they've celebrated winter solstice for thousands of years. Well, I suppose we all have in some form. All of the cultures have done this, and I'm kind of fiddling away around here because I am going to change the background a bit as we talk about the celebrations going on. Let's bring a bit of the Capricorn on. That'll kind of get us into the spiel for the moment. There we go. I'm hiding. There's the goat. There's the tail. Anyway, well before Christians' Christmas came to us, Odin was the main character of the drama of these celebrations. And Odin is disappearing from me. There's Odin. Hello, Odin. Yeah, he was the man of the moment. And the main character, as I say, in the celebrations. And he was regarded as the Yule father. And his folklore does seem to be within the fragments of today's Santa. And Santa was actually more common. When I was a child, Santa, I didn't really hear the word Santa very much. He was really known as Father Christmas when I was a lad. And there's Father Christmas there. And goodness me, I haven't got the right size picture. Anyway, there's a Father Christmas. And Odin is the main Yule Log man. And I'm going to be talking a bit more about that if I've got time later. And Odin is more towards the fertility side of what happens at Yule. Very different to what I'm going to be talking about with the goats. So there's quite a mix-up in translation of our Samhain, or Halloween, I should say. Halloween, Samhain, Yule, and Christmas symbols and celebrations today have sort of got muddled up, and hopefully I'll clear that up, just talking about goats. So we're now living these celebrations, and I think we're aware of it. We get tints and we get the tree, we get the habits, we got to have the bits and bobs and so forth. But we wonder how it all connects together. And I think we live in a very fragmented, watered down, commercial, favorable version of Halloween, Samhain, and Christmas. And right through to New Year as well. And also in Ireland, well before Samhain, there's the end of harvest, Puck Fair. I think I have a Puck Fair. Yeah, there we go. They've even the goat there for Puck Fair. And that's, it's told as honouring a goat that warned Cailleach people of the imminent arrival of Cromwell's soldiers. But I wonder if this was a tradition that was actually moved from the Yule Goat celebrations that arrived on this island, now called Ireland, after the Vikings arrived and brought this tradition after they settled down. Now, during recent weeks on Nature Folklore, I've made reference to various forms of folk drama. There's the Galshins, which I did as a child, the Geysers of Halloween and so on. And then we got the Mummers, which I talked about, was it 2 weeks ago, I think? Or yeah, mischief time. The Mummers, Straw Boys. And next Sunday, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Run Boys, the Wren Boys. So this is all folk drama from this played out around this holiday season, from Halloween, so on, right through to this solstice, Christmas time, and on through to New Year. I'm going to be talking about wassailing next week, which is really in that tradition as well. But in parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, North Germany even, I know in North Germany we get the Krampus, don't we? And there's been a lot of talk about Krampus this year for some reason. A lot of people are reenacting Krampus. I think it's because people are getting ugly or something. They want to scare their children with Krampus, which is like the goat who's gone horrific. And there's suggestions to ban Krampus, but that comes, I think, from a more modern German twist on what I'm going to be talking about very shortly. And even North Poland's got into the act as well. But the Yule Goat, still part of Christmas tradition, it seems, in Scandinavia, and it's very much on the same lines, similar lines to Santa and Rudolph. And there's a nice picture. I think that represents a fairly modern Scandinavian approach at the moment. And we're going to be talking about that little elfie lad. That's not Santa, actually. I'm going to be talking about him very soon. Now, through both Norse and Germanic lore, the Yule Goat is believed to be an unseen spiritual being. I love that picture, a goat playing a violin. There's a challenge for you, Kate. But the Yule Goat is believed to be an unseen spiritual being that dwells in all of our homes during the few days of Yule and through Christmas, and it overlooks the preparations and celebrations of the holidays. So it's revered as a kind of a protector. You know, it's almost like the old goat is the ancestry that looks over us, the spirit that looks over us to make sure there is unity, love, and well-being over that time, even though the goat does look in a kind of evil terms, which I'm going to talk a little bit about why we think that very soon. Anybody who's a goat keeper, that's the last thing they think about. But today there are homemade woven goats that we'll find. If Donna's on board, I'm not sure if she is. She was mentioning about this, but homemade woven goats around Scandinavian Christmas trees also quite common in parts of the USA as well, because a lot of the USA people have Scandinavian heritage. And these little creatures, the woven ones, beautiful, aren't they? They're a welcome invitation for the goat spirit to come and visit into the home and reside there for a few days. Now, with the Santa tradition and stories, Santa is surrounded by Christmas elves, as we're familiar. That's what we talk. But with the Yule Goat tradition, he's accompanied by the spirits that are the Jotommy. There we go, the little lad there. I told you I'd feature him in a moment, and I'm going to be talking about his wonderful sort of tradition. I love these little people, and I'm going to be changing to him in the background as well. So we'll have that. And now these Yule spirits, driving up my photos again, are illustrated as images of a goat. They're goat riding gnomes. And as I say, there can be tomte, they're called, but they've got different names illustrated as Nissen in Norway, Tomten in Sweden, and Tontu in Finland. Now, like Santa and his elves, the tradition of these is for the Yule Goat to also not only deliver gifts to children on Christmas Eve, but also deliver food to cats. But obviously Christmas Day is a corruption from the Yule date, or is it? Because after Christmas Eve, the sunrise time reverses, and it's not particularly straight after Yule when it reverses. The midwinter solstice moment isn't precisely when light changes at sunrise and sunset. Look into it. It's very complicated. It's all complicated. Anyway, so let me attempt to start on the speculated origins of the Yule Goat and the traditions and folklore that founded them. Now, feel the Yule Goat reverence at Yule is far more ancient than any other Christmas or pagan reverence that we have, or any other holiday traditions that we're aware of. The goat really goes back thousands of years, like a lot of things I talk about. I think we can go right back to the Babylonian times with that as well. And clue to this is the association of the moment of solstice, entering the sea goat month of Capricorn, as I've featured already. Now, this, as I say, this was probably known since ancient Babylonian times because they did the calculations. Perhaps older than that was the discovery of being aware that late December and early January is the main birthing time of goats. Way back in Mesopotamia and Babylon, Anybody could have been watching goats and they would note the constellations or where the moon is, where the light is, how things are going. They would be aware of the time when goats are born, way before the mathematicians came along and did the astrological observations and charting. Now, as I mentioned from time to time during nature folklore, oral communicated traditions took on new forms. During the scriptorium time, the medieval scriptorium time, the scribing. And then those forms altered rapidly once the printing press industry took off. Now, during the mid to late medieval scribing age, perhaps from the 11th century, there are records of men in Norse countries. They dressed up in full-size goat costumes, a bit like this. This is a very old photograph of some men in goat costumes. And I assume this was influenced by what the scribes had written down around the 11th century onwards. So either this may have been an attempt by the scribes to interpret the oral tales that they were hearing, to try and achieve better, maybe more spiritual understanding, may we say. Now, when I was a child, when I first heard folklore stories, I also dressed up, and I dressed up as the characters in the stories. And this was the intention of helping me to understand the deeds of the characters better, the deeds of the characters I was hearing in the stories. I thought if we dressed up with the friends, act out the stories, we can perhaps get an understanding of what was going on. Now, the other possibility I feel is when the scribes taught these people the stories, remember the scribes were revered because there was only a few people that were educated enough to do scribing and reading. Most of the population couldn't read. So I'm wondering if the scribes, they'd written down these stories, they read them out to the people, but the people themselves couldn't memorize, they couldn't write notes. So instead of writing notes, people would interpret what they were being told by the preachers, by the scribes. So they would interpret through dance. They would interpret through pretending to be the characters they've heard of in the stories. And of course, doing it with your family and your neighbors, you all take on different characters. And there you go. You got folk drama. Folk drama was a way in those ancient times, medieval times, of reading a book, because they couldn't read a book. So they ended up dancing it and acting it out. I think, and that's why it's a beautiful art. And that's why it's been with me, I think, all of my life, because I've never really been much of a book person. But the common people, it looks like they invented their folk drama to try and interpret what they heard from the scribes. Now, I'm not clear how the Yule Goat was celebrated before the age of scribing. I don't think we ever know, because it was up to the scribes to write it down, because we read, we do stuff according to what we read, and the storytellers tell stuff according to what we read. But I think what I'm about to share gives us clues about the goat reverence at this time. And we're talking about the 11th century, in the middle of the scribing age, really. And especially as we know that this is an astrological time, and there's a lot of mythology around it of Sagittarius moving into Capricorn as soon as we hit the winter solstice. And we're also observing the natural birthing cycle of goats. So we got those two things in hand. So maybe the scribes were trying to translate Yule Goat folklore through drama, as I say, through dance, interpreted story. And one theory is a popular one, that the goat year reverence to the 11th century originated from the wonder and reverence what these scribes had heard. And I'm trying to get this up. And it was Thor. They were really inspired by Thor, the god who had goats, who pulled his chariot. So I think that inspired something about what they were listening to, what they were scribing down as a celebration of this time. So I talked about Odin, but it was Thor who really gave a lot of inspiration to the folklore that was about to come. Now, in these stories, they heard and scribed down that Thor's goats were called Tangrisner, Gaptooth, and there was Tanjoster, who was the tooth grinder. And I got a bit of a cartoon for them, so you can get it. I hope you can read that. It's not very easy. I'm looking on a very small screen. Now, the story here is Thor slaughtering both his precious goats to eat. So you think, why would, there he is. He's sort of like a god and a hero, just zooming through the skies, through the thunderstorms. Why on earth would you just suddenly kill them and eat them just before the moment of Yule? Well, Thor knew. He knew very well that if I can get his picture up, that the goats would return to life by the following morning after he'd eaten them. And they would they're pulling his chariot again. Now, what was going on there? He would eat the goats, and there they are in the morning, all ready to go yet again. And they have, I would have thought, actually, and maybe there are stories and I haven't picked them up yet, but I would think being a transition from Sagittarius to Capricorn, I'm intrigued why there isn't a Pegasus-style human horse that's not in that story, or even two horses, or even one chariot horse, and the chariot horse is eaten by Thor or some other god, and then boom, the following morning replaced by two goats. That would make sense of the transition astrologically. Anyway, that's the story that's laid down. There is Thor eats his goats, and the following morning they're ready to go charging off again. So it's a complete, what's what the word was? A complete reincarnation. There's a word I'm trying to think of. Anyway, they're totally replaced. So maybe that's how the story once was, but I'm just nattering away with this horse the goats thing in a dream world speculation. I've not come across that story. So I'm going to return to 11th century Sweden and the men that are dressed in goat skins. Now, there was a leading man when they went house to house from the 11th century onwards. And the leading man would be carrying an effigy of one of Thor's killed goats. And I've refrained from bringing photos up for you for that. It's quite gruesome, of course. And the others, the lead man had the goat, and the rest of them were like ghosts of goats. And I assume they went door to door with this effigy on the eve of Yule. And what they would do as they went door to door, they would either tell the story or act out the story of Thor eating his goats. And maybe like the mummers, you got Thor, you got the goats. There would be a sort of chop, 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 chop. And then the goats there, and they'd be eating away at the goats, or at that point offering the people door to door something to eat. And then in comes the miracle medicine person who kind of resurrects the goats back to life. And there is Thor charging off with his two goats again. After he'd had a sleep, of course, after the gluttony of eating the goat's head and the goats as well. So there they are. The goats are full of life for another year. And so the goats are killed off symbolically, just like we translate the sun does on Yule Day, Yule time. Now, from the Swedish example, there was a similar Norwegian tradition you're probably going to be much more familiar with, which is the Yule booking. The Yule booking. I think that's it, isn't it? The Yule bucking. And with this 11th century onward tradition, although that's obviously not 11th century there, but we're talking about that. The goat masked men went around, and this is a cartoon of them. They would go around and they would be, they got the goat head, and they're wearing fur capes, and they would have those fur capes dyed with berries. Excuse me. And or sometimes green, dyed with the green. And it says that in a way, they represented ghosts traveling through the Yule night from the old cycle into the new cycle to come. So I assume these drama ghosts receive payment of gifts in exchange for doing these performances, just like the mummers and the geysers. And these gifts, because there wasn't currency at the time, there'd be gifts for aiding winter survival, such as food, fuel, clothes, and something for the health, like supply of herbs for throats and coughs, that type of thing. That sort of thing I need right now. So these gifts were also given to the Yule Goat players as a thank you, because it wasn't just begging. It was people believed that these Yule Goat players were coming around to bless them, bless themselves, bless their homes, and bring spiritual protection. Because again, like with the geysers and mummers, there's a sense of mystery. You don't know who these people are that got the goat's heads are. You don't know that they're the next door neighbor or the blacksmith. They've just appeared from some realm and they're there at your door looking for something to eat and so forth, but in return give you their blessings and protection. So they were a protection racket, really. But in a nice way, I suppose. And the protection was to keep the other winter ghosts away from bringing in ailing health and just make sure there's good health in the homes. And also, it's said that these players, these Yule Goat players, their ghosts were replacing morbid ghosts. And they will replace morbid and melancholy that might be in the home. And by their visit, they're bringing good cheer that seeps into the home. They leave a bit of themselves and then around the tree and their decorations and their food. So out go the morbid, melancholy ghosts. Everybody's cheered up with a song and a dance and a rhyme they can join in. All good health, great blessings for the year ahead, and with all the laughing and smiling, that's going to last for a few days anyway. So the visitors cheered people up. Now, by sharing the example of this, the 11th century folk drama, as I say, bound to have included song and dance to raise the spirits. When does song and dance not raise the spirits? And anyway, you're perhaps understanding more now, just from that little bit I've shown you, how diluted our modern tradition of trick and treat and even the fragments of things we do at Christmas really is. How wholesome is that, you think? You know, the 11th century goating and the reverence there. So I'm actually sharing more with you about the Yule Goat than I intended. As I said, I was just going to do a couple of minutes with this. I'm going to break a moment, see what you're saying, and then we'll bring on the first guest. You've got some comments. As I say, I'm really making a large subject of this. Look at this. We're halfway through already. Lama are definitely going to have some stuff on this, like Drossima in the Nutcracker. It's a good thing. Regenerative, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Regenerative themes with this cycle of life. And someone's making a wonderful reference to Astrid Adler. She hasn't joined in on these yet. She's very busy with her willows. I can understand at the moment. And then a lovely goat person, Kate Cloudbox. I assisted a dozen goats giving birth during mid-January in an Iowa ice storm. That's the weird thing about it, isn't it? The kids decide to be born in the most winterish of time. It's incredible. But hers breed in spring and deliver in Leo, much easier. And that's what happens with farming. You can change things around a bit. And this must be a calling up a doubled ring from Adrian Foley. And Sherry's got something here. Max shows a image of a goat playing the fiddle in his painting. Is that where that's from? It came out as being a kind of in the public domain. I wonder if that is where that's from. Wonderful. Thanks for that. And Donna's here. We're going to show your tree thing a little bit shortly, which is lovely. Thank you for being here, Donna. Thanks. She's here. Fantastic. Right. Where are we going from here? As I said, we're going to have the first guest who naughty me hasn't brought her up. So if you give me a couple of seconds to get our first guest up. I hope she doesn't play right away. If she does, forgive me and enjoy Chandler Nichols in a lovely setting. She's a lovely regular poet here. Previously, we've seen. No, I'm bringing Sinead on first, not Chandler. Oh, I've got. Okay, I'm getting my program mixed up here, so I'm going to line up. I got the video, and it's a very lovely short one. It's a bit different what we've had from Sinead. Regular poet on nature folklore. We've seen Sinead amongst her trees, sharing her words, sharing her beautiful poems. So this is very different. What Sinead's offered us today is a very short, very sincere, reflective poem in a very different scene that some of you are saying you've got now in the northern USA and Canada. We're going to be getting it, it seems, just after Christmas. So is this a little Sinead McClure video, which really explains itself. So just get on Sinead now. Here you go.
Easter Snow. The blizzard of 1947 buried Boyle for 40 days in Lenten ice as hard as vinyl. Postman John Gormley went missing on his route through the curlews, his bike found as spade depth down on Breechle Hill where fuchsia failed to thrive. John's fate unknown until his apparition on the crescent, a half-moon smile worn weary in the watery sunshine. Out across the whirls of white bluff, the townland of Easter snow had at last found its moniker, and my mother was almost 10 years old.
I expected. Oh, the volume was okay for you there, because I didn't do a sound check before. I just put the video on through in the lack of time. So I hope that was good. I'm going to continue with the Scandinavian drama men. I was talking about the 11th century with them, and I just had to get a few more photos up for you if I get around to talking of these. So let's see where we're going. Now, these from the 11th century, it was a wonderful thing. People were expecting them, but over the centuries, these goat drama people, the ghostly goat drama people, they did get scorn, developing from the purity interpretations of the Christian church, and which, as the Christian church developed over the centuries, evolved very much into their own doctrine of morality, as we all got familiar with. And eventually, probably this was by the 15th century, and photos. Finally, the church proclaimed the Yule Goat as a demon. And there's someone who's made a demon, a demon goat. And the demon Yule Goat was marketed by the church as being a dangerous morality upon the people. It was destroying people's consciences and their belief and their purity, and no longer regarded as a spirit of blessing. The church said it wasn't blessing you, it was tricking you into being the devil. Nothing to do with dark to light, the old skin to the new skin. You know how the church went on. And in Swedish records from so-called Christian scribes, talked there as the Yule Goat as being a dark, scary, demonic figure. So maybe that's what started the whole Krampus thing that came up from Germany, because they would have condemned this more than any of the Scandinavian countries. And so they said there was these demonic characters that were roaming the countryside, and Don't let them trick you. They're dangerous beings. And because this is what the church did, or tried to do, as in many cases. And I'm trying to bring up another picture here, but so let's put this character up. Yes, right. This is going to be the thing. And this demonic character was still going around demanding food, and the church was saying all they're doing is intimidating and frightening devout Christians. They were criminals. They had a protection racket. Well, keep them away, blow them away. Tell them to, Anyway, remember, this was also the age when the ancient traditions of the alehouse wives I talked about before, Samhain time, they were also marketed as being an evil tradition as well, that was blinding the faith of the pure Christian people. And the alehouse wives were then branded with a new culture invention of being called witches. And I feel that in both situations, the alehouse wives evolving from rustic dome-shaped shelters into their full-service taverns, which they did from their wealth over the years. The begging folk drama Yule Goat men, they actually evolved into becoming very lucrative theatre companies, mobile theatre companies. And that was becoming very lucrative. They had their territories. People expected them. They were paying more for their blessings, pay more for their performances. And of course, this was taking money away from the church. The alehouse women were taking money off of the people, or a lot of them didn't have currency, but if they had currency, it'd be going off to the alehouse women, or even the produce from their farms and their work and their labors. And then these theatre performances, that was less for the church getting. They thought they had to do something about it. All these side things, and in this case, these Yule Goat founded theatre companies, they were taking income streams away from the church. And the church had their tightly linked commerce guilds anyway. The marketplace was connected to the church. They had the guild halls, which had trading sessions and banking and so forth. That was all connected to the church. And if money was going away from those to everything else, then the profits were seeping away. So this was a sort of, I think that's what was behind it all. It was all about economics. So the commerce guilds invented and branded these intimidating, fear-mongering stories of evil practices, both of the witches and the Yule Goat people. And they would go out and preach and convince the people. They would have stories. They would scare them to say, keep these people away from your life. They're not blessing you. It's against the church on all this wonderful stuff from the Gospels you've been learning. Jesus wouldn't put up with it, for instance. Anyway, the alehouse wives became witches, as we know, and they reappeared at Halloween. And then we've got Yule Goat men. They became, it's said, servants of the devil, and surprisingly, they have found a way to reappear, and much later as Santa and Father Christmas. But I'm going to talk about that much later. Now, during the 17th century, the printing industry was starting to happen, and this was pushing out the scriptoriums and the scribing. And of course, the church got onto printing as soon as possible. Equipment was not affordable for the general public. The churches could afford them, as long as they could make sure they bring the wealth back in, and he wasn't going to the alehouses, wasn't going to the goat theatres. And so printing equipment wasn't affordable for home businesses for 100, maybe 200 years. So at this time, Bibles were being printed, different interpretations, different translations of the Bibles, and they were being printed rapidly. And during Puritan Christianism, what was happening now, the churches were setting up schools. It wasn't just going to be the privilege of the scholars of the church and the scriptoriums. They wanted to widen the readership because they wanted more people to be able to read the Bible from themselves, especially with these new translations. There was kind of supporting, I suppose, the commerce as well. So the reading public was getting wider because of this printing going on. More people being schooled, So the elitism from being able to read was fading away because of this wider circuit of readers. And also the Gregorian calendar, which had been introduced not long before that was gaining acceptance over the previous Julian one that came in with the Romans. Now in Sweden, 17th century, the young men, they still managed to dress up as goats. They still got away with this. There we go. Some young men dressed up. That's the sort of 17th century kind of costume. But instead of acting out reverence for Yule time, what they did, they visited house to house. Bicretine wasn't at Yule time. They actually moved it forward to Christmas Day on the new Gregorian calendar, and the one that we all use today. And they kept the door-to-door tradition going right until the Epiphany. And the Epiphany was, maybe to some people, known as the Three Kings Day. And actually the Epiphany was the Christmas Day of the old previous Julian calendar. So these men, they were performing from the modern Gregorian calendar day of Christmas Day up to the Julian calendar, the old Christmas, as the Scots still call it, the Three Kings Day, which with the Gregorian time, let's call it something else. And so it became Epiphany. So as I say, the Scots still call it Old Christmas because, funnily enough, even though the Romans didn't get into Scotland, I think the Scots held on to the Julian calendar the longest. I think they were pretty much the last country that were converted over to the Gregorian, a Presbyterian thing, I suppose. Now, these young men in goats' costumes, as I say, going house to house. What have I got going here? During the 17th century, they visited houses and they performed traditional short story drama plays. Here's another. Well, there was another picture, and they were singing songs, performing pranks, and all this guiding around is very similar to the traditions of the Galicians, geysers, and mummers, and are presented as in recent nature folklore. Now, the pranks from these lads, they would always feature a Yule goat in some way, because really the influence of the Puritan Christian church, the Yule goat in the minds of people was now being a scary, intimidating character. But, we kind of hold on to those old scary traditions, don't you? And that's no different in Scandinavia. You do it in secret, but the church will say they're an enchantment, stay away. And these goat people, they would turn up at houses and performing the plays, even inside the houses. And there was a bit of an intimidation. People still believed in the old traditions much more than the church, but they would behave in the church. They would try to follow the church. They'd go to mass and so forth. But in the conscience of people are these old traditions. But unfortunately, this fear has been put into them. So there's like with the fairies in Ireland, people are scared of the fairies in Ireland when once upon a time the fairies were blessing. That's another example. So there's these characters, they're knocking on the door, give us your money or we'll be cursing you with evil for the coming year. So even these people going door to door were bouncing off what the church was saying and threatening people with evil if they didn't pay the money. So it was getting a little bit dirty. But of course, the people now believe this because for 200 years, the church had been warning them of these characters and the devilish ways and their ways, protection rackets that would get them. They were just scary. Anyway, in the conscience, there was this heritage of dark to light that was still within the people, and they still believed in the presence of the Yule Goat. But unfortunately, conscience and fear was getting in the way. But then let's come up to the Romantic age of the 19th century. And there was another change in Yule Goat tradition that was helped along by the change in the printing industry. The printing industry was now more compact. It was a bit like the start of the home computer industry. Very few people had computers in their home in the 70s, maybe not so many in the 80s, but goodness, by the late 80s, 90s, people were, there was no, computerism wasn't elite. Everybody was jumping, well, not everybody, a lot of people were jumping onto computers, and they weren't getting online until the 90s. So it was a bit like that when the smaller, more portable, more home-based printing presses were coming. And all these home businesses were starting up doing printing. And the majority of the population had been schooled by the church-sponsored schools. They were people that were rebellious against the church were setting up independent schools with more wider thinking. And so the population was now learning how to read. And this was, so with a faster distribution of printing presses, more people reading. So there we got the Celtic Romance revival in Ireland, at least in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England, because people could read. What they were doing is they were picking up scripts. This was happening around Europe. And the Scandinavians also were going through their Norse Romantic revival too. So the door-to-door Yule Goats men, dressed as goats, were still around in the 19th century, but they changed from being intimidated door-to-door beggars out for personal gain and trying to be defiant of the church. And I mentioned earlier how goat men, in the past, they from 11th to 14th century, they become prosperous theatre men. Then the Puritan church suppressed them, and that suppression returned the folk drama players into being poor, as we mentioned. But the church and government were now taking more and more in taxes and dowries and so forth from country folk from their farming harvest. They were grabbing this. So by the 19th century, there was new economics that had started because of the Industrial Revolution. And that was changing things around. And because of the Industrial Revolution, the Yule Goat men were becoming prosperous again. And many were actually connected to the church secretly. So instead of being door-to-door beggars, they started being generous. It was them that were doing the giving, not demanding. They were still in the goat mass, but they were doing the giving rather than the begging. So who were they were secret givers of gifts. They would come into the houses and there they would go, and the children would have fun with them. So there they go. Again, they're the local generosity. A bit like Santa does today. Santa comes with the presents and the gifts. So this is what the goat men had become at this time. So this new kind of benevolent interpretation of the Yule Goat, there we go. Nope, that's not working. Yes, we're back. It gained community acceptance. People love these new goat people. And even the church thought it was wonderful because it sort of went into the morality that they weren't actually practicing themselves. But these goat men were practicing the morality they were teaching. However, these goat images again started fading away, and they were replaced by other images. And I've described through previous stories of all the different images presented by the Galicians, the Geysers, the Mummers, the Straw Boys. But the Industrial Revolution also created its poor culture as well, through its own greed, as we know, and no workers' rights, all that type of thing. So the poor people that were on the side of this, they became beggars again. So the house-to-house calls of performing folk drama resumed as being a moneymaker for these poor people. They were begging for food and shelter. So this generosity phase was quite short. But instead of goat men, it was now children going door to door. And that's an example of what they were like. And they were acting out short drama stories. They were still containing the evil to light stories and the forgiveness as well. And they would add a few songs and they would dance. And it would help if they had a musician, because they called musician. They collect more money. But mask wearing was still part of the tradition to hide their identities. But they were performing other characters now, heroes, villains, and medicine men, just as I mentioned in the Mummers. So the Yule Goat had faded out in folk drama. By the end of the 19th century, adults were studying. They were reenacting folk drama scripts they could all read. They were buying the broadsheet printed sheets that they could get in the sheet. God, I'm full of tongue twisters. Drama scripts on broadsheets, printed sheets that they could buy in the street. And that's the way they bought them anyway. So the adults started serving money-making events from their folk drumming. You know, this was made to make good money at this time of year. So there in the 19th century, there was the assumption of old law, and it was all getting new interpretations. And again, the Christian church had tried to demonize the Yule Goat for about 400 to 500 years previous to this. But all this eventually fell apart in the late 19th century and after. And the Yule Goat in Scandinavia ended up returning as the image of the gift-giving, just like St. Nicholas. But that's the goat form of the Scandinavian St. Nicholas. And that was the new image. And I believe that's the tradition that kicked off the Yule booking, which is now, seems to be the tradition of folk drama of the Yule Goat ghost. It's still alive amongst Scandinavians. And I'm ahead of myself there. And I gather the Yule booking is very much alive in Alaska. You might know other estates, but there's a lot of Scandinavian descendants living in Alaska. I imagine that's quite similar for Montana. Certainly Upper Michigan, there'll be some of it as well, because they still speak the old Scandinavian languages there. So today, through Scandinavia, the Yule Goat tradition is very different. And as I say, people are now, instead of dressing up, they're making these characters with wood, wicker, and straw goat figures. And well, they first did. There was a whole bit of trickery went in. You make these wicker things, and you call on neighbors. And the mischief there was you would hide the wicker goat for them to find. However, the hiding of wicker goats in other people's houses, I think that fizzled out during the 80s. And like all traditions at this time, even the modern version of this wicker Yule Goat has become watered down. They're more commonly seen in Scandinavia placed under Christmas trees. And there's some here that are under the Christmas trees. They're made with straw braid. Look at the lovely braided horns and red ribbons around their necks. That's how the tradition has been now. And often they're quite heavy, these woven Yule Goat figures. They're too heavy to place into trees. So people are making smaller ones. And I talked about Donna. Here's Donna Johnson's one. She's got a little one on her tree there. There's Donna Johnson's jewel box there. That's hanging from a tree. So that's becoming very much a common thing now. But the larger woven goats at the base of the tree are there to provide, now the way they tell the tradition, instead of the home, these characters going door to door, you have your own DIY goat at the base of the tree or on the tree. And that is said to be a temporary home for the ghost spirits of the Yule Goat to enter your home. And that's where they live. So it didn't require door-to-door people to actually present you with the spirits. Here's our spirits of blessing. Give us your food. Give us your money. No, you do it yourself. You got these wicker ones instead. So those, they're still those Yule-box. They're still blessing the home, the ghost spirit, just like hanging a breeder cross at Imbolc. But this time, this is about the spirits welcoming the cheerful new light into the new Capricorn month. And reverence for all the new goats being born right now, bringing new milk, new life for the year opening up ahead. So for me, this evolving Yule Goat story and reverence takes us way beyond Jesus into the beautiful essential nature mechanics of living nature that religion and even corporate living seems to have set out to demonize and demoralize in our lives. And I think, fortunately, with the help of social media, one of the plus things is awakening us more into what nature is. We're getting out more and inspired more, and how we're part of that nature and not a ruler of it. So this Goat's Yule time now being part of the annual cycle, people are making big goats. Look at this. This is what people are doing now. You know, there's community Yule box now as part of this annual. So I trust my interpretation of the Yule Goat story and folklore this afternoon has made a bit of sense. I've got more. I've barely started to say this was supposed to be for 5 minutes or less, and I've taken nearly the full hour. And if the computer will let me, seeing this celebration of time seems to have started with a goat and not Jesus. And that's a wild goat that was approaching me in the car, and I couldn't. I took that years ago, so sorry it's a fuzzy picture, but it was coming up to me in the car. It wasn't a sort of a fear thing. It was excitement trying to get the picture of it, because if it got too close, I couldn't take the picture. So there we go. This is how I feel the traditions of this time. It started with this character, a goat, and not Jesus, not Santa, not a reindeer, not even a turkey. And I feel that perhaps at this time, we should be celebrating this time perhaps with goat's cheese quiches rather than turkey and ham. Would you agree with that? This is a goat's cheese quiche time because of the goats. And as I say, that's the first part of this nature folklore, the saga of the Yule Goat. So anyway, I got more to come if you'd like to hang on a bit longer. What's Donna saying here? Lots of Scandinavians in Wisconsin. Of course, with Upper Michigan, that would work too. Where my daughter lives, I bought my little Yule book ornament there in a little Norwegian shop. There we go. We got the stuff. And there's Claire Road giving a quick 15 minutes to a little bit of Yule bocking there. Great that you're here. Thank you. And Adrian Foley, great story. And I think we caught up with the comments. Right, so I'll quickly move on. Ghost cheese now. Claire's got that. She's thrown out there. She's not picking up the turkey next week. She's getting in a load of ghost cheese. Brilliant. No, I don't say throw out the turkeys. That would be very unfair, wouldn't it? But just thinking of how this, bringing this all together, the fragmentations we're living, and how this whole goat story, I hope it's brought it together, the traditions of this time, a lot clearer. So to move on with this a bit more, Chandler Nichols. We can't forget Chandler Nichols. Let's get Chandler Nichols up. As I say, I hadn't lined her up, so I'm going to line her up this time, and we'll get her video, which I should have had lined up, and it might go straight into her poem. So let's get this video with it's got lovely colors, and I hope the sound is all right for you. Let's get rid of the Yule. No, it hasn't automatically go. So there we go, Chandler.
Here's wisdom. As the wheel turns to the realm of the Holly King, the mistletoe crown falls from the oak to his head, for only he has the power to withhold green leaves from the cold frosts of winter. When thorns adorn the horned god's antlers, the oak guides the maiden and mother in the collared times. But the holly walks beside the crone in the colder times. Just as we must bow our heads to the sun, we can look up to the moon. The crone, the hag, the Cailleach, aged goddess of wisdom. Her season is time. Her season is mine. The season when the night is clear and the stars shine brightest. This misunderstood season of starvation and snow, of gentle death and harsh peace, coming to terms with sorrow. I've come to terms with this feeling of being out of place. For what is gray winter but different than the other seasons of the year, with their colors and blooms? Now branches bare scratch cloudy skies, offering little food, little shelter, and deep reflection. Who am I to the triple goddess, part maiden, part mother, part crone? Yet the latter's cackling call is what I hear and seek out this time of year. For her words are short and sharp, telling me most what I need to hear. Observe the frozen trees, though, and you will see, too, her tenderness, to tuck them in a blanket of snow, and tumble the fallen grasses into beds for the animals. Her gnarled hand knows how to caress the trees into blissful sleep, lulling them to dream, unaware they will be to the darkened days before them. Who else but the Winter Queen to preach the wisdom of contrast? Are you brave enough to look into her eyes and ask her, who am I? The trees, after all, reveal their inner structure in the winter, when the falsity of the leaves is dropped. So why not you? Brave the cold heart as you brave the frosts. The hearth, after all, is warmest in the coldest of nights. The wine tastes as rich as the stories told through the flames. And perhaps, if fortune serves you well, of your own story she will tell.
Well, thank you very much for that, Chandler. And I hope, of course, I won't tell until I finish the show. I hope that came over okay, because I actually made a mistake there. I was supposed to bring up her video direct from a hard drive and play it, but what I was doing was taking from one cloud and putting it on another, which should have sent the broadcast haywire, but I think I got away with it because I think we got pretty good signal. So thank you, Chandler, for that. I thought it was beautiful with the background and the crickets trying to join in there. Brilliant. And Lamo one that says this is all wonderful, and Cliff Carr, brilliant. Goats, not Jesus. So anyway, I think I better get on to a little bit on log tales. I better change my background to make it very sort of more log tailish. Where's my logs? I got a bit of log here somewhere. I did have a bit of log. Oh, here's a bit of log. Here we go. We'll have them in the background now for this. Because this was originally titled as Yule Log Tales, and I haven't said a darn word about them yet. So let's get on to a bit of Yule Log. Now, Sherry Murphy, lovely Chandler, thank you very much there. Thank you. And I'm sure there'll be more compliments on that. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I love that. So here we go. The running theme of after the Yule Goat is indeed the transition from old cycle, the old annual cycle. We're going into the new one. And this is what the Yule Log is symbolic of, one of the main symbols. Now, the Yule Log tradition, it's Norse as well. And it comes from the Nordic word Yule, which the Saxons turned around to be Yule, meaning a Christmas day to them. And a season of hunting, they say. And also it's said that the Saxons brought our word jolly from Yule. So the Saxons brought us the jolly word, which is very good, jolly Christmas. And though it would take a whole nature folklore session to tell the many Yule Log stories, which was my intent, but it's not going to happen. I prefer talking about goats. And but I'm lacking as a storyteller to tell you that many presents, and maybe I'll do some stuff on the side. But as well as being a transition between annual cycles of the old skin to the new, as I say, dark to light, this is a fertility time. It's one of the fertility times of the year. It's the flow of life into the winter solstice, grand conception time. There are stories of copulation of gods and goddesses, of gods and humans, goddesses and humans, all mating together. There's a lot of Yule stories all about that. And to celebrate all this is the rekindling of the new hearth. The new hearth fires, the fire of the womb, of the new life appearing in spring onwards. Even in Iceland, people at Yule time, they go to the geysers, they go to the hot pools and celebrate around there. It's a celebration of the hot pools being of the new fertility, that is the womb of the earth getting ready to give life for the new spring. So again, we're in kind of Scandinavian influence there. But like with the Yule Goat, I'm saying Norse with this, because the womb of Freya seems to be very much in many of the Yule Log stories. And these stories seem to start with Freya mourning the cold, lifeless embers in her womb. I did have some Freya pictures, but I've lost them, sorry. But she is said to call out a need for a good fiery log that reignites her embers. She wants a good fiery log to reignite her embers. A long log, of course, helps. A long Yule log that will burn for hours and hours. And maybe she needed Deuter Dagda. And hopefully I'll have time to talk of him shortly. If not, it'll have to be offline somewhere. But Odin comes along. He serves her well. That's what I heard anyway. But some Norse myths follow a dispute saying that Odin couldn't have been laying with Freya because he was too busy fighting Zeus, chasing away Thor and his goats. So he didn't have time, he said. But there are stories I've heard of Odin and Freya. Anyway, as I understand it, the Yule log is the log of Odin. And by tradition, it should burn in the hearth for the 15 days from the solstice up to the Epiphany Day. 6th of January, isn't it? And then that tradition, funnily enough, got reduced to 12 hours. The log in, you just have the log on for 12 hours now instead of to Epiphany. After dragging it in, that seems to be quite a thing, doesn't it? But in modern times, I think 12 minutes would do, doesn't it? And that's a miracle. Anyway, the Yule log, fallen oak, should be used, and this is kindled with the dancing sparks of birch, and they use for kindling. And here it is. There's that's done as a decoration, but things are wrapped because the oak is difficult to get lighted, so it'd be wrapped with all kinds of other material, especially birch and holly. It said that holly adds a protection if you wrap it with that. So all that's put together as it's put into the fire, and it gets the oak ignited. And once the oak is ignited, it's very hard to stop it. So today, consumerism has entered the traditions. The drag log, here, is this the one I was hoping? I was hoping, because now you drag a log, and what happens is, instead of ready for the fire, it's actually dropping off the presents for the children to pick up. But I think because of the time running away with me, that's about as much as I'm going to share on Yule logs, even though this is supposed to be a Yule log session. But there's one thought, and that is our emotion of hope. And most of us are feeling this during solstice and Christmas. It's a time of wishes, really. It's a time for healing and fair play for those that are less fortunate around us. And with the politics and health situation that's around us for the last couple of years, and it's getting very intense, as we all know, hope may be seen as a challenge of bringing us to a more comfortable status from the current situations. But to me, hope is recognizing and perhaps even trying to hold on to fragments of the small pleasures in our lives and focus on those, rather than just tune in to the international sorrows. Deal with what's around us. The current weather forecast here is not for rays of sunshine here until January here at Capricorn. But I hope that where you are, you will wake up with a sense of a ray of sunshine. Who you are, what you do through the rest of the winter, let's see, it's all that sunshine. It's going to blossom us. We're going to all blossom for the spring again. So as I say, I'm running well into overtime here. If you don't mind me keeping going a bit longer, I would like to share a little bit about the story of Deuter and the Grand Conception. I've told variations of this story on Nature Folklore. It's a big drama one. I know probably 8 versions of this, especially of the local Morrigan and Deuter mating or Dagda mating stories. But here's a bit of my favorite. I don't know how far I'm going to get with it, but it commences with a local well here that's less than 2 miles away, 3 kilometers. Before introducing this well, I'm going to start talking a bit about Cailleach. It's a hill of Cailleach, and it's got many caves. And I did have pictures up of it, but they've disappeared. And these caves, they were formed by the sea. And they were pounded through to the other world and woke up what was said to be the White Hag. And that's what the story tells. So it's told locally that Cailleach woke up as the water filled her womb in the other world and pushed the land to form a hill. I wish I had the Cailleach pictures, but they're not up today. About her womb inside, the more for large, meaning infinity, Corrie, the vessel of the womb, the cauldron, the Cuin, the place of quiet weaving. Together, Monacorcuin. Say Monacorcuin quickly, and what does that sound like? So the other name variations I have heard are the Moricu, the infinite garden queen, and Morigu, the infinite garden queen, as featured in Hennessy's Water Goddess book from 1870. I've got the cover of that. There you go. And even you may know her best as the Morrigan, of course. So let's bring the other character into the tale. Here's the Dagda, the Deuter. Well, he is. Come on, don't be shy. There he is, the good god of the Tuatha Dé Danann. Now, when I first learned of him, he was the Deuter, and well, the Deuter was actually a hag in the Berg, and I showed you this either last week or the week before. That's the Berg there, the mountain range, and it has these waterfalls with caves. And this is on the Isle of Mull, a part of the Argyll, when you say that fast, Argyll. And I talked about that, I think it was last Sunday. And in Deuter's womb, if I can allow to get to it. No, I'm not allowed to get to it. Anyway, let's look at that as the womb behind those waterfalls. There she is, and it's said that she comes out there, and when there's a storm, she's dancing on the sea, welcoming the passing souls as they're going past during a storm. Now, shortened to Deuter himself, the Deuter seems to have become the Dagda of Ireland anyway, so let's get back to the Dagda here. Here's another imagery of him. And another story is Deuter was the good god of the Tuatha Dé Danann, and that's the Irish one. He's the good god of the harvest. I've talked about that quite a bit on Nature Folklore. And he carried the cauldron there, and he never emptied. Nobody went hungry. And he carried the harp, which is the Yusna, with these 4 corners that conducted the 4 seasons of the year. I'm really rushing through this one. And he enchanted the people he met with the 3 strains of enchantment. I'm really repeating myself. There's a nice image of the 3 strains. But the one let's focus on now, the sun tree, the dreams, the enchantment of dreaming, the changing of realm between light and dark. Very appropriate for now. And there are a few stories of people trying to steal the Deuter's cauldron, and that's why he probably carried his club to try and ward off these people. But here's the well I'm talking about. And it commences here. Actually, commences as someone. I think I told you the story then, when Deuter was exhausted and from carrying his cauldron of plenty. So he traveled to this spring well, and he would drink the water, and he revived his weakened spirit and energy. And so he needed to revive himself so he could carry on feeding the people, almost like a Tuatha Dé Danann Santa, isn't it? And just after Sawan Deuter approached the well to revive his weakness, and he came across 3 dark-cloaked women crouched over the well as it was bubbling. And I did have 3 hags, but We'll put these ones up instead. There they are. So agreed to. And all these three women, they noticed they were washing clothes. And Deuter looked to himself and, wow, he was naked. And these three women were washing the clothes, and his clothes were covered in blood. And after a conversation, I'll skip at this time, it was revealed Deuter by these three women, known as the Grigna, and they're the human incarnation of the Morna Corcure, the Morna Cure, Morga, Morrigon, whichever one you would like to say. But these three women here, known as the Bev, the rock, Bacha, the fire, and Feofe of the water. And they told Dagda, this weakness that year was fatal, as his bravery was sleeping, and the fertility spirit that created the harvest and abundance, it all left his body. So they said it was time now for his time was done. He was going off to the Tirnanog, and they were gonna sort this out for him. Have I got some Tirnanog? No, I've got some more hags. These are the hags talking to him, telling him what his plan is. You're banished to the Tirnanog. But if he wanted to stay in this earth realm and return his stamina and bravery, and his fertility, so he could create the harvest and abundance. There we go. The he must follow the three hags of the Morigna through the caves to the center of the hill. And let's get some caves up if the little mouse would let me. There you go. That's a lovely cave feature. And actually, if you go through the end of that cave, it's quite an amazing sight. But before they left the well, another hag, goddess Grigna, she appeared. And here's an artist's impression of Grigna, which you might have seen. And she also had a cauldron, and she filled it from Dagda's, so she could continue to do his work while he got his strength and stamina back. So she was going around feeding people through the winter and helped to shelter them as well. And also fed the animals and birds with various stories as well. But as the Deuters, Dagda entered the hill, the human forms of Bave, Macha, and Fey, they became rock, the pool of the loch, and the air as well. So let's see what I got here. This is what he came to. This is the mythological pool that's said to be in the middle of the mountain, the Loch Lake in the middle of the Cailleach. And so here was Deuter in the morning of Coracurn womb. He still had his cauldron, harp, and club. Nobody was going to take those away from him. And there they are there. And anyway, that loch there, the Wishkashiga, let's talk a little bit about that. It's a wonderful story of how it got there and how each spring the water overflows from there. And 4 rivers are originally created to fertilize Ireland. But I'm going to leave all that part of the story to Limbo. And because that includes the birth of Breeder and Coran the Harper. But the voices of the Morigna, well, they were still present, though they'd disappeared physically. And the voices present, and the doctor was told to get into that pool, get into that loch. And he found that the water was warm, absolutely delightful. He felt relaxed bathing there. And the Deuter stayed there by the loch. He would bathe, he would play his withna, and in case he lost the drift of that and his power of enchantment, didn't want to lose that as well as his stamina. And each day he was in that pool. This was starting, so I remember, and we're coming up to the midwinter solstice now. And that water was getting warmer and warmer, but being so comfortable, Dagda didn't have any desire to go outside into the winter winds and weather. He was so relaxed there. And the voices of the Morigna, they asked him to start adding some of that porridgey stuff from his cauldron into the water. Excuse me. And it bubbled every time he put the water in. Get a refresher here. And as he put this in, the water would give off light. So he stirred it with his club. Now, one of the things I did talk about in the Alehouse Wives was how the brewing from Babylonia through to Egypt. Now, one of the things that's only been recently discovered is that ale, the ancient ale, wasn't like the stuff we get in cans and in bottles now. It was actually more like a porridge. It wasn't so much alcoholic as it is now, but it was actually served up as a barley porridge with yeast. And it was actually given as a health thing. But if people sipped off the top, then they would get the alcohol stuff as well, which is brilliant. So it's almost as if ancient brewing's going on with this Dagda story here by him putting his porridgey stuff into the water, because this is a time of brewing. There's a lot of natural yeast about in winter, and it's that natural yeast that helps with the brewing. But that's another nature folklore story. So when he bathed during the days after adding, he kept adding some of his porridgey, barley porridge. He sensed each time it was warmer, he was getting closer. He felt very close, as if the water was actually going through him. And the warmth was created by the fire, which is known as the Folklore fire. And here's my image of that, the Folklore fire. And that was the fire energy of Macha. And anyway, I'll look see what your comments are after that one, because before I continue this, because I'm well into the overtime here. And Sherwood Dow's is here somewhere, if I can get the car. Your time blessings. Thank you for sharing knowledge and wisdom. Right, I would like to share a Logfellow story. And says the hermit, Simon Masters. Right, there he goes. Put it in the comments for now, Simon, and let's get your Logfellow story up for the next Yule time. Or we might be able to get it and put it up on the 26th. That would be quite something. That's a great. Thanks for your contribution. It would be lovely to get you up on this, Simon. It really would. Anyway, back to the Deuter. Each day in that lock. If I can get to the knock that out for a minute. Each day in that Wishkashiga, that water, it was warming with the added gruel from his cauldron, fermenting and brewing away there. And at the point of solstice, the Dagda was in that water. It was almost boiling. It was almost cooking himself like a lobster. But he was released into a feeling of total union with that water. And that's the grand conception in the folklore. It's his conception with the Cailleach inside the Morna Corcuan, Morricu, Morrigan, whatever you call it. So the life harvest and debris of the past cycle that was out of his pot is transformed into this whole grand conception, ready for the incubation for the next spring. And yeah, I think that's as much as I'll tell you on that one. There is a lot that goes on to what happened to him as he left, but that's all about the spring. So let's leave it at that. Let's quick have a flash through Blessing Your Homes with Green. As I showed you, I couldn't put the green on because it disappeared. But believe me, that's a lot of holly and ivy and stuff there. But that's the power of the green screen, isn't it? And what I tell this, just for the last few minutes of this, I'm going to change my background to something a bit more comfortable for the finale here. Let's have that. Let's bring the mistletoe up. That's definitely, it's really a reminder of the traditions. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. So let's go over a few things about the green in your home. You've probably looked a lot up and you're applying the traditions all over your home. You've done a very nice job of it. So you got your tree. As I say, you got the tree here. That's blessing you already, especially if you've got goats below it, as we were saying. So there you go. There's the tree of life, regenerating life. And then we've got the baubles, being wishes of traditions, imitating apples. And some people, as I said, they hang apples like that. And then there's the chocolate coins that hang as wishing traditions from the old banging of coins into logs. The presents below the tree, they help us. Supposed to be a food and things to help us through survive winter rather than the latest iPad. The tree itself, some say, is to bring the spirits of our ancestors in. And I said that with the goat as well. Also, the ancestors to warm up the fire. And also to warm up the fairies living in the trees, some stories tell. And then we got the wreaths. We got those circular wreaths, which I couldn't put on. Willow, made with a frame of willow, maybe hazel. And then you stick in the holly, ivy, and mistletoe in them, maybe. Some lavender and rosemary is a good addition as well. And this is to protect us as well, the wreath of protection. And it reminds us that we're in a cycle. We're not at a beginning and end. It's not the end of the year at all. It's a transition into the next cycle. So different folklore applies to all this of what we can bring into the home. Churches, for a long time, they forbidded any of this green coming into the home, and now some encourage it. The holly, ivy, and mistletoe, we've got various versions of folklore of that, saying if they hang outside, like I said, on the reef, it protects us from thunder and lightning, as well as fear-mongering evil spirits, just like the goats did. And in the wild, the holly is the plant that does that job. It does protect oak trees. I haven't got time to go through the holly king and the oak king at the moment, but the holly actually, the spindles there, act as conductors. So if there is thunder and lightning, it'll protect the oak tree. It will strike the holly before the oak, because the oak, without holly, is the most vulnerable tree to lightning. So no holly, ivy, and mistletoe in our homes before the point of solstice. That's in a lot of traditions. And ivy's not actually allowed into the house without mistletoe being present. And mistletoe must never touch the ground. There's the mistletoe I've got in my screen. But mistletoe must never touch the ground when it's harvested. Catch it in a blanket. And the hanging of mistletoe is for bonding, even the male holly with the female holly, bonding those two together. But don't bring them in until solstice. So I bet everybody's got your greens in the house, but it's supposed to not be done until after the point of solstice. So if I had that neck thing on, I was definitely breaking the rules. Now, mistletoe berry picked for every kiss is shared under the mistletoe. We know all about that one. Right, I think that's as much. I think a reminder on the green is gone way over an hour and a half. I better do some conclusion. And thank you for your knowledge, John, here from Cliff, Carr. Patricia, thanks from Vancouver Island. And the solstice, handsome, says Kate, thank you very much. And there's Simon wants to get me under the mistletoe. Interesting. Right, okay. Anyway, coming up, this is not the end of it. As I mentioned at the start of these sessions, brought to you due to, thankfully, our Patreon subscribers. There they go there. Oh, that's it. Which hand is it? There you go. That's the address for that. Thank you very much for that. Covers the I have a lot of subscription payments because I'm operating on a whole stack of computers, and so I can bring you up all of these different whizzy videos and stuff, and these guests. We haven't got live ones this week, but we will have. I'm going to be recording a series of short videos and stories of what I'm not covering on these Sundays. I'm going to talk a lot about that at the beginning of January. But on the 26th of December, we got the final fourth part of this Yule season series. And we're going to have a combination of first footing, like there. And that's something I have done a lot of. And so I'm looking forward to telling you about that. And something else as well is the picture has vanished. Here we go, wassailing as well. Blessing of apple trees, done a lot of that as well. So both of those are straight on after Christmas, 26th of December. And all about the blessings that they provide for us as well during the first days of increasing daylight here in this northern hemisphere. And then on the 2nd of January, I don't have a picture for this, but it's the Introduction to Folklore Sessions 2022. That's going to be a casual social event to enter the new calendar with. So I will share intentions. Please share your intentions, your poetry, your stories, your intentions. You can send me videos. You can be on live. My intention through 2022 is to have more variety and more guests on each Sunday. and then establish the regular topics as part of a library collection of short videos for subscribers rather than these long lectures. And you can refer to them at any time if you're a subscriber. And then 9th of January, we got the start of a 3-part series, which is going to be divination. And the first one is actually going to be a water divination part. So that's going to be a 3-part on divination. Any questions you got to ask? It's lovely that you followed me through this far. This is a very long session. Thank you again for the amazing guests that were on video, Sinead McClure and Chandler Nichols. Always welcome with the poetry. And if you're watching this after the broadcast, certainly I'll be answering comments as they come in. And Donna, thank you for thanking. And Simon, thanks for enjoying the entertainment. Lovely, thank you. And Sherry says thank you as well. So thank you for all of the thank yous. And I thank you. It's a joy to be presenting this to you and archiving this for as long as we're alive, I suppose, as long as there is an archive service. So subscribe. There's bells on the YouTube if you're watching that. Subscribe on that. I'll tell you what's coming up next. You'll be reminded. So really, I do have a safe week. It's going to be lots of enchantments. Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to be here before Christmas. So wishing you the merriest of Christmas, merriest of Yule, and all the joy that you can muster. Get rid of the melancholy. I've had plenty of it myself in the last week. But time to get jolly, especially from Tuesday onwards. So just wishing you the merriest, jolliest, healthiest, abundant, protected Christmas. And stay healthy, stay wise. And until next Sunday, which is St. Stephen's Day here, Boxing Day in Canada and the UK. Thanks. That's all I got today. Until next Sunday, play well. So thank you very much. And bye-bye.